Welcome to Code Savvy Presents, a podcast about computer science, technology, accessibility, and inclusion. This episode of Code Savvy Presents contains a frank conversation about some pretty heavy topics. If you're sensitive to discussions on things like drug use or eating disorders, you might want to opt for a different episode. Thank you.
I am Lindsey, and my nickname is Lux. So I go by either Lindsey or Lux. It depends on where you know me from. Lux kind of like originated from art school. So a lot of people that I knew from college call me Lux still, but a lot of people that I knew before that call me Lindsey. I'll answer to either. Yeah, I am an autistic woman, and I was recently diagnosed. So it's kind of the diagnosis is new. Obviously, the mindset is not, since it's been with me my whole life, but it's been an interesting year. I'm an animator and an artist. I teach sometimes. So I went to school at the Minneapolis College of Art and Design, and I studied traditional hand-drawn animation. Actually, back up before that, when I was still in high school, I ended up getting pregnant at 17, had my daughter at 18. So I was pregnant when I walked across for my graduation, which is funny. And so I didn't get to go to college right away. I sort of took the year off and raised her. And then I went to like a tech school first and struggled to find any jobs with just an associate in like visual communications. I was trying to explore like graphic design in that neighborhood. So I don't know like who your target audience is. Should I talk about getting clean at all, or?
You can if you want to. Yeah. I mean, this is really just, most of the people that listen to this are like either people in tech, so people working in tech, or like adjacent to technology. Okay, cool. Yeah, in Minnesota. So
sure. Okay.
Yeah, it's whatever you're comfortable talking about, honestly. Okay.
I'll just talk about it. And then if it's like not relevant, I guess, cut it.
Okay.
Or whatever. Yeah, I was like really depressed being a single mom and not being able to find a job, not being able to get out on my own. I was living with my mom, and I started using a lot of drugs and alcohol and kind of self-destructing, and it wasn't pretty. But then I got help and I got clean. It took a while. I got clean from meth, and then I started using alcohol more, and then I got clean from alcohol too. And maybe like a month or two after I got clean, I started art school. So I went to the Minneapolis College of Art and Design to study hand-drawn animation, and none of my credits transferred from my first school. So it was like starting over brand new, which was fine for me, like mentally, because I wasn't, it was nice to sort of get that introduction. I think I would have been really overwhelmed and scared and intimidated if I had credits that transferred and I just kind of was dumped into like the higher classes.
Do you kind of feel like those were two different, not like two different people, but two different lives kind of that you, because of the transition you went through?
Yeah, for sure. I do. Yeah, it's funny how I've had a lot of moments throughout my life where I've looked back and been like, wow, I've grown so much that I'm totally different. So I don't know, maybe it's like akin to a spider shedding its exoskeleton. I don't know. Yeah. But yeah, so I studied animation. And then when I was at school, I think my daughter was like 7 when I went back to school. Graduated in 2012. So she was she was born in 2000. So whatever the year is kind of how old she is. So I had, for a 7-year-old to a 12-year-old, those are like elementary ages. So I was raising her alone, got a lot of help from my family and friends, couldn't have done it without them. Was working part-time as a barista at the Spy House, and then finishing up school. And I was so burnt out when I was done with school. And I kind of had this moment where when I graduated from the first school with my associate, I was so young and naive that I thought I was just going to find a job right away and it was going to be like awesome. And I would be able to get my own place and, life will start. And I had such a hard time finding work. And I think at that time, the economy, it was like 2000 to 2005, like the economy was just not doing good. The housing market started to crash. So it just was, I don't know. I think there is a level of like a disillusionment that a lot of younger folk have when they graduate, where they think like, yeah, I did all the work. Now I'm going to
it's going to be awesome. Yeah.
And so I was like really, really astonished, like, what? This isn't just happening for me. So I kind of just expected the opposite when I graduated from MCAD, where it was like, I know a job's not going to fall into my lap. I know I still have a lot of work to do. So I was just like really depressed and tired, and I wanted to take some time off. So I took like maybe a year off and just worked full time as a barista, and then got tired of that because it was like, no, I'm not trying to be a barista for the rest of my life, with like art school debt. So I just started making work and networking and talking to people. And I really think like with the way I am in social situations, it made more sense for me to go back to school. I mean, I started my bachelor's degree at MCAD when I was 25, I think. And so like going from the ages of 25 to 30 felt similar to me mentally or like socially as it would for maybe like a neurotypical who's 18 to 22. So I just have always kind of felt a little bit delayed, not like in a bad way, but just kind of a late bloomer, and
kind of at your own pace, like things. Yeah.
Like it takes me a while to get accommodated to something enough to adapt to it. So like anytime I've ever gotten a new job, I remember being like, my first job was at a Dairy Queen, and then my second job was like a gas station. And I just remember it felt like it took like a month for things to click. And I always felt so dumb, and like I would always ask questions, and I felt like I was annoying my coworkers. But then one day everything just like clicked into place, and I felt like a pro, and I didn't need to ask, and I knew things. So I guess it's just like the processing the information just takes a while, or like it needs to stew for a while, and then it clicks, and then I get it. So it's kind of like, I feel like I noticed that theme throughout my life a lot.
I was going to ask you about that. Like if there were certain things that you've noticed over the years, or like, you know, because you were just recently diagnosed with autism, like what were kind of the clues or the things that were starting to make you wonder if that what might be what's happening or what is?
Oh, it's funny. Actually, the clues and things that made me wonder were the same things that made me like confident that I was not autistic. So it's funny because I grew up with my mom and dad were married. I had an older brother and I have a younger brother. And my older brother was both my parents' first kid. My parents are now divorced. My dad remarried and had some more kids, and my mom just kind of was just me and my brothers, felt like my core family kind of.
Yeah.
My older brother would do these things. Like the thing that made me question and realize what autism was one day we were watching The Little Mermaid together. Weird, right? I think I was like maybe 8 or 10. I was pretty young, and he's 2 years older than me. So similar age.
Yeah.
And I don't know, some people probably aren't familiar with The Little Mermaid, so I'm going to just like talk about the scene. So there's a scene where there's a prince that's in love with, he's been saved from a shipwreck from a mermaid, and she has transformed and she has legs, but she can't talk. She had to trade her voice. So there's this scene in the Disney movie where the prince is like playing on a flute. He's trying to recreate this song that he heard when the Little Mermaid saved him the first time. And when she came up on land, he didn't know it was her. So he's like looking for this woman. So something happens that like another character comes in and tells the prince to stop looking for what's already in front of him. And he looks over at Ariel and he's like, yeah, good idea. So he throws his flute into the ocean. And like at that moment, the sea witch comes up disguised, and she's singing. And my brother was like, she took that flute and swallowed it, and that's why her voice got higher. And I was like, what? Huh? how do you know that? Like, I mean, that's not something that happens in the movie.
Right.
And I was just like, okay, so he thinks, like, I think that her voice has changed because she used magic and stole Ariel's voice, and it's like glowing from the seashell, and it's like making her voice sound like Ariel's. And he was like, nah, she grabbed that flute and swallowed it, and that's why her voice is different. And I was like, okay. And then later on in the movie, there's another scene that reiterated his thought process, where the sea witch is disguised as like a human woman, and she's singing to the mirror to herself, and she takes a hairpin out of her hair and whips it like at the mirror, and it kind of hits the mirror, and as the mirror goes back, she sees her reflection in the mirror, which then shifts to her sea witch reflection. So it's like a woman looking at a sea witch.
Yeah.
He thought that she pulled the flute out of her throat and threw it at the mirror.
Yeah.
And that's why her voice changed. Because at that moment, like, the sea witch's voice came back in. God, this is probably so long and rambly for people who haven't seen the film. But so he was like, yeah, she took the flute out of her voice, and that's why you could hear her voice again. And that's why you could see her as a sea witch. And I was just like, that's so strange to me. Like, why does he think that? And then somehow I just like put it together with autism. It was, I don't know if it was something that like I learned about in school or what, because I was pretty young to, I mean,
like a different perspective, or like just not really seeing things the same way. Is that okay?
That he's not like, he's adding in extraneous information, like the context clues aren't leading us to the same results, I guess. So I remember I didn't think like, he's so stupid, I can't believe he thinks. I just remember thinking like, wow, he's totally like processing information differently. And I said something to my parents about it, and my whole life they have just told me, don't ever say you think your brother's autistic, because you're just being cruel, and that's mean.
Okay.
So like I was just met with fear and don't talk about it. So but then I ended up finding out that my older brother also didn't speak until he was about 2.5 or 3. My parents had to take him to a speech therapist. And for some reason, I mean, it was the 80s. He was born in 1980. So I don't know. I guess they didn't like put 2 and 2 together thinking about autism. So I was always like, my brother has autism. And then I would read about it. And the things that I would read were like your classic Rain Man, Sheldon Cooper. And I mean, that's my brother. My brother he's kind of like, he acts like Napoleon Dynamite. He's like, I think he just has never had the emotional intellect to understand that he just thinks differently than other people. Right. But he's on some level, he knows he's different, but he takes it out on himself. So he gets really insecure and really angry and lashes out at people. So he was bullied a lot. And then instead of like, just like, oh man, that sucks, I was bullied, he would beat everybody up. And so I don't know. I mean, I don't know much about like anger and violence and things like that I don't know that that's associated with autism. I think it's probably, we had some childhood trauma.
Coping mechanism of some sort.
That was just his way of coping with like the divorce was really hard on him. And just, other kinds of like emotional trauma is just like, everybody processes it differently. So that was his kind of go-to. So I saw him in all of these traits and just kind of did that. Like when you seek out something, you kind of seek out things that confirm confirmation bias, I guess.
Yeah.
So everything I would research was like stereotypical, like guy, like adolescent boy, autism.
Yeah.
Still high functioning. I mean, like, well, I shouldn't say that. I hate that term actually, but, my brother is incredibly intelligent and he can recall like, but there's been so many times where we've been talking and he'll be like, no, it was raining on that day 8 years ago on a Tuesday. Like he knows the weather at the time of the day kind of thing.
Yeah.
He really, really likes video games and he's amazing at them. And I think it's just his spatial awareness, pattern recognition, and structure and logic. Like he's amazing, but his social side of it is just tough. It's tough for him. But so I grew up seeing that, thinking that's what autism was, thinking like, I'm not autistic because that's not how I am. And there were all of these moments growing up where I would watch him interact with people, and I would watch how people reacted to him, and I would like get embarrassed for him. And there were all of these moments where it was like, he's doing this thing and it's embarrassing himself, but he doesn't know it. I don't ever want to do that. So I'm going to make sure that I like put that in my mental bag of tricks of things to never do in a social situation. So
Yeah.
I think like I just started masking from really, really young. And I had this like example of stereotypical autism to watch. So it just like gave me the tools to be like, ooh, he just did that thing that I probably would have done too. But seeing the
now
reaction
not to do that.
I'm not going to do it. Yeah. So,
did your brother ever have a diagnosis? Like, was he diagnosed ever? Okay.
No, he had ADHD. He had a diagnosis of ADHD.
Okay.
My mom has ADD. I don't know if my dad was ever tested, and my younger brother has ADHD. I also have ADHD, but like nobody paid attention to me my whole life growing up. I was always the quiet kid who didn't want to be bad. Like I had to be good. I had to do what I was told. And I had a lot of anxiety of just like doing things wrong. And, you know, now that I have the autism diagnosis, I really feel like my anxiety, which I've been diagnosed with and I've suffered with like almost all of my life, I don't even know if I actually have anxiety. I think it's just a symptom of my autism. So my autism tends to like, I still don't even know what all of my traits are or like how to describe it. But I think for the most part, I'm always analyzing everything, every situation that I'm in, every group of people that I come in contact with, I'm watching what they're doing, how they're interacting, and analyzing what would be the best way to interact with them in a way that they will accept me and like me. Yeah. It sounds really manipulative, and I guess it could be seen that way, but like I think it's more about I'm just really worried about not being good enough or not fitting in. So I'm going to do what I can to like be good. Right.
Yeah. And be accepted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Normal. Yeah. So like I've struggled with a lot of things, and the whole like be good, be normal thing. Then when I got, you know, I had my daughter, and I ended up gaining a lot. Well, not a lot. I gained some weight with her, and then I started struggling with weight. And slowly but surely, as I was trying to lose some of the baby weight, I fell into a meth addiction. But when I got clean from that, I started like eating very rigidly and strict, like I was restricting my food, and I was exercising more and eating less until it just developed into anorexia. And so I still struggle with food and eating. I feel like I've definitely gotten a pretty good handle on it. And honestly, I think Gen Z is great for like being an example of like, this is my body and how I look, and it's okay. And really like, there's so many people younger than me that have given me the confidence to be like, okay,
it's so true. Like our generations did not have that. Like we had so much pressure and just unrealistic expectations on ourselves. And it's really refreshing to see the younger generations embracing themselves. And
I am so proud of Gen Z. I love them. I mean, I'm biased because my daughter is a Gen Z, but I just think that like they are so smart and intelligent, and they're fearless, and you know, they just do these things that they're then either picked on or they get lashed out at for. But it's like, you know what, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to do this thing that makes me comfortable and make it normal, and then other people will too. And I love it. So yeah, I mean, we grew up with like, I think it was like Kate Moss, like just ridiculously unhealthy. I mean, everybody knew that Kate Moss didn't eat, but it was like, she's so pretty.
That was acceptable because she was beautiful and famous. Yeah.
So like the 90s were just plus I do think that there was it was almost like having low self-esteem or like talking about yourself like, oh, I hate myself, was like glamorized. It was almost like
totally
cool if you were like that. So just mixed messages all over the place. But yeah, I struggle with with eating and food and body dysmorphia. And so battled anorexia, which was also combined with bulimia, because I couldn't just go for a week without eating food. Then I, on the weekends, I'd go to the grocery store and buy the entire store and eat everything in sight. I suppose we should put a trigger warning eating disorders. Yeah. And it was just like, it was so miserable because it was also like, I think eating for me, again, having the ADHD, and I don't know if this is an autistic trait too or not, but like the dopamine chasing, I'm always looking for activities that like boost my dopamine. So food totally does that for me. So I think like I would restrict my food throughout the week. And then when I would like sit down and actually eat like a good meal, I would get such a release of dopamine, but then I would purge and the shame was just unreal, was just so awful. So it was like these highs and lows, which then just caused more self-hatred and guilt. And yeah, that was hard. And I kind of got help for my eating at the same time that I was getting sober from alcohol. So I did end up going to AA. I don't anymore, but I don't go.
You haven't struggled with
them.
it.
Yeah, I learned a lot of really good stuff from the program, and I just kind of took what I could while I needed it. And then when I kind of outgrew it, I just moved on. But I think it's a wonderful program for people who need it.
Yeah.
And a lot of the skills did transfer from like, because you're kind of looking at yourself, your whole self and everything, like what kind of trauma did you go through? Like, why are you drinking? Why are you restricting your eating and all of that stuff? And it's so funny, like going through all of these introspective moments through my life, I still never realized that I was autistic. I mean, and I questioned it too. I saw a therapist probably, I think I was maybe still going to MCAD. I can't remember. I might have graduated. It was like 2012 to 2015. I was still struggling to get on my feet financially and get out of my mom's. My daughter was like in high school and I was just feeling really like, I can't believe I'm a leech. I just live at my mom's. I can't get a job. Like, what's wrong with me? I started questioning, like, maybe I'm autistic too. And I was seeing a therapist at the time. And I asked what the process would be to be evaluated for it, and was told, even if you were autistic, you're in your 20s, 30s, like, what good would it do you to find out? So let's just not find out. And I was like, okay, I guess that's helpful. And it was not. I wish I would have advocated for myself more, but So yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about that. How, since you've been diagnosed, how has that helped? Like, how has it helped you to know that is the state, that, like that is what is.
Oh my gosh, it's so validating. I cried. I feel like I cried for like a month straight when I found out. And I feel like what I went through, I've talked to at least a few other women that are sort of my age, younger, but like kind of in the same range, that went through almost the exact same experience. So I feel like with the pandemic happening, a lot of us with executive functioning issues are struggling. I mean, everybody is struggling. So I don't mean to like say neurotypicals don't struggle, but I think it just put a lot of extra focus on executive functioning. You're working at home, so you don't really have to take a shower. And then you go for a week without taking a shower. And it's like, oh God, what am I doing? Like, my life is a mess because I haven't taken a shower for a week. And then it snowballs. But I totally forgot what I was even talking about. If
it's been helpful?
Yeah, it's been absolutely 100% helpful. And it was such a shocking realization too, because all of the other times that I sort of questioned if I was autistic, I kind of felt like, no, I'm not. Like, I didn't fully believe it. So it wasn't a big deal. And then I was talking to my daughter one night about just neurodivergence in general, because I did end up getting a diagnosis of ADHD the first summer of the pandemic, maybe the second one, I can't remember. So like, I considered myself neurodivergent, but we were talking about autism, and I was like, I really think that like I could totally be a candidate for autism, but I am extremely self-aware and I have a lot of empathy, and autistic people don't. They aren't self-aware and they don't have any.
Those are the stereotypes, right? That yeah.
I mean, even I thought about it, like the way that I thought that my brother was autistic was not in a cruel way. It was in a like he could benefit from like learning about this and getting some help, but my mom was always like, don't talk about it.
Right.
And so like, I don't know, I never had like a bad view of autism in my mind. So once, so I said to Cypress, like, I don't, I have a lot of empathy. I'm really self-aware. And she said, actually, Mom, I've been on TikTok a lot, and there's a lot of people who are talking about autism and the different traits. And there's this thing that like women do this thing called masking. Well, she's so good at being like respectful of everybody. And she is always using language that's like gender neutral and stuff. So it's not just women. And I know some men do still have moments where they feel like they have to mask, but I think it's just a little bit more, it's easier.
Common.
It's more common for men to sort of just be who they are and not feel like they need to mask. And women are just always like, I shouldn't do that. I shouldn't do this. I have to act like this. I have to make sure I'm good. I have to do this. So especially for someone who's like, I have to be good all my life, like I'm going to mask really hard. So I didn't know what masking was. And then I was told that some like typically women, non-binary folk, people who are autistic in that, I guess that end of the gender spectrum, tend to have like higher empathy or higher self-awareness. Not necessarily, I don't mean to generalize, but it was something that was new to me that I was like, what? Like, wait, an autistic person can have empathy? So my daughter told me like, actually hyper empathy and hyper self-awareness are traits of autism or can be traits of autism.
Yeah.
And I was like, what? No, that can't be. And so I looked it up. And as soon as like everything was confirmed in my brain, it just like, I felt like I was in a movie. Like everything felt like it went into slow motion. And it was just this like I couldn't work. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I just sat and stared. Actually, I started sobbing to my daughter. We were FaceTiming and I was like, I think I'm autistic. I really do. Like, I need to let you go because I need to research this and I need to get some help. And the more I researched it, just the more everything started to fall into place and everything was just like confirmed and validated. And this weird, like my whole life, I feel like I was the kid who was like, hey, Dad, look at me. Hey, Dad, look, I'm doing this thing. And I always was met with like, that's nice, dear.
Right.
I mean, so many anecdotes of that. So it felt like to me, my whole life, even like me to myself was like, hey, look at me. Like, hey, I'm autistic, Lindsey, look at me, but nobody ever did. And so,
well, because you were kind of trained not to, right? Like you were, it was your family experience that said, no, you don't look at that.
Right. It's bad. Autism is bad. Oh, and then all of the stuff with the vaccine that happened throughout the 90s and the 80s, like just the society has just put such fear and like stigma on autism. Like, I don't know. I just was, I watched a bunch of videos and there's this one autistic woman who did a TED Talk and I cannot remember her name. But she was amazing. And she was talking about how the realization that you're autistic after having a stereotypical view of it is just the most intense paradigm shift. And I loved that term, like paradigm shift. That's what needs to happen in society about it. Because then I was just like, I was crying because I was kind of like both sad and relieved because I felt like all of the shame I've had throughout my life of feeling different or not fitting in, or why did I do that thing? Why did I talk to those people in that way? What was like, why? I had an answer for it, like regardless of if it was like, an autistic person should still have been aware not to tell someone they didn't like the gift that they gave them and then they made them cry, which I've done, like regardless of if you're emotionally intelligent enough to know those types of social structures or not. Like it was just relieving. Like, I don't know that, sorry, I'm putting that in a weird, like it wasn't like I was trying not to take accountability for things that I felt like silly for or embarrassed about in my past, but at least I had like a tangible reason why I did those silly
Right. Well, and especially if if you have a history of being very self-reflective and like questioning that all the time, like it's nice to have an answer and not just have this open-ended loop that you're kind of going on.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It was like a movie ending to me. Like I feel like textbooks are going to be written about this time in history, about how all of these people came out and were like, holy crap, I'm actually autistic. I didn't know. I had this emotional breakdown where I cried for a week straight and stared at the wall, and then like, sought out help, and my life is a million times better, because I really think that my life is going to be so much better. Like I'm so hopeful, and so like I'm proud of it. I'm proud that like before I always knew I was kind of a quirky, weird artist type, but like I don't know, I just like I like that about myself. I like what I like. I like how I think and what I do. Like I know that there are some things, especially socially, that like need some work, but now that I know that it's because of my processing social situations, I feel like I can at least help myself out in some situations that feel awkward, where I can be like, can you explain that a little bit differently? I'm interpreting it this way or that way, and that just seems comfortable to me. So
I wanted to ask you about that too, as it relates to your work. Like how are you advocating for yourself, or have you had to ask for accommodation, and have you like what kinds of things have you noticed, or have you had to kind of work through now that you have this
that one I'm still figuring out, because I'm not sure how I want to work through it. I have told, so I do freelance animation, and one of the biggest clients that I freelance for is Target. And it's almost like I'm on staff there, because it's like a 9 to 5. So I've got like an art director, supervisor, producer. I've talked to both my art director or creative director and supervisor. And I think I've maybe told one or two of my coworkers. If any of them follow me on social media, they all know, because I posted a lot about it on social media, but I haven't told anybody, like other than my producer. I haven't told anyone directly, because I guess at first I was like happy to scream it from the mountaintops, like, oh, I'm autistic.
Yeah.
That's why I am the way I am. I feel better. As soon as I kind of started to do that, I got a lot of negative reaction from my family.
Okay.
So my family is not being supportive of it at all. And honestly, I think that it's because most of them are also on the spectrum, and they have just a negative view of what autism is, stereotypical view. So they're just not willing to accept it. So having that happen sort of stopped me from talking to people at work, because I'm not trying to make people uncomfortable by saying like, hey, I'm autistic, because when I say that, I'm not looking for anything from a person. Like, especially at this point in my life, I don't feel like I maybe needed accommodations when I was growing up. Like I have dyslexia and ADHD, and reading has always been really hard for me, because I think one of the ways that I interpret my world is through visuals, but also spatially orienting myself. So if I can't orient myself spatially, like when I'm reading, I can't understand the story and what's happening, or I feel like maybe I missed something, I need to go back, and then I'll reread it. And it's like, no, I didn't catch anything. And then I just feel frustrated and usually throw the book.
Right.
So I don't read a ton. I love stories, and I love like hearing stories. It's just, it's work for me to get them into my brain. So I tend to not do that.
Do you think that that's influenced the direction that you've gone in your work and your art? And
maybe not so much for reading, because I mean, I do like to write, but I I guess I just don't write a lot, but visually, I mean, I'm a visual person. I'm a visual artist and I make 2D things and I think visually. I think auditorily, I don't know what the right word is, but like sound is really important to me too. I think if I hadn't gone into something with the arts, I would have done something with sound. Oh, I love sound because it's like structure. Its structure is just fantastic. I think I would be happy reading like textbooks about the structure of music and the patterns and notes for like, it's so fascinating to me, structures and systems, but I didn't know that until I found this diagnosis. And it was like, oh, I systemize everything. Like everything is a system. Like when I'm driving, I'm really good with directions and everybody's always told me that. And it's because I just like use visual landmarks to like navigate and like, if I'm driving somewhere and I have like a map application or something, I'm also like creating the map like in 3D in real time as I'm going. So I'm trying to memorize where I am. And I mean, like, it's just something that I do, but it takes mental power. So I get drained after a while and go on tangents and forget what the point was. I can't remember what we were talking about, but
I was asking about work, like how this all has kind of affected your working with clients, or have you had any struggles with that?
I think, I mean, sometimes communication can be really tricky for me because before I knew that I was autistic, I always used to say that like I get really confused when people talk or like reading visual, like just language, I guess, in general, like putting it into verbal language, any kind of idea or concept. I feel like it can be interpreted in two exact opposite ways all the time. And I feel like I struggle with that all the time. And I never really knew why. So whether it's the tone, where you're like, don't do that, or if it's like, don't do that, like, you have to understand those tones. But I also think that my brain goes really fast. And I like in this next concept I'm going to talk to you about. Have you ever read one of those like paragraphs where the words are all misspelled except for the first and the last letter, but you can still read it because your brain's just looking for shortcuts?
It fills in the words.
So I think I do that if I get like verbal feedback. Like if I've done something on a project and then my producer or somebody is giving me notes to change, I'll read the notes so fast that I will insert the wrong word for, I'll think like instead of text, I'll hear shape or think shape or, so I'll mix things up and then I'll do things wrong. And then people are like,
that's not what I said.
You do like, so I think like I need to, like, as far as like accommodations for work, I don't think that I necessarily need accommodations other than it would be nice to have the people who are giving me feedback know that my communication style just can, like, the process can take a little bit, or like I have to ask clarifying questions like you said you wanted me to change the timing of this text coming in, but did you mean, this kind of timing or this kind of timing? So like, I always have to ask the questions to try to figure out exactly what information it is that I need, because I can be really literal and misinterpret things. So like, I guess if anything, like in the way of accommodations for work, I mean, I've had producers or art directors in the past whose style of giving me feedback, I like was great. And I never took it personally. And it felt like we were in it together. Like the changes they were requesting were for the better of the whole project. And then I've had some art directors who, when they give me feedback, I don't know if it's just me thinking they're saying what they're saying, or they're using a certain tone, or what it is, but I'll take feedback personally sometimes, where it's like
there's like a breakdown of the communication.
Where it's just like, oh, I'm not good enough for this project. It doesn't feel like the producer is talking to me and we're working to make it better for the whole. It's like they're talking to me like I'm a cog that
problem
needs to be replaced or something. Yeah, I'm not working correctly. And yeah, so I guess I don't know if it's just like a patience thing. Like I think people who talk to me in that sense probably are saints in the patience department because I can be a little like a little tough, a little neurotic, but it's nice to know that now so that I can tell people, because I am comfortable saying like, oh, wait, hold up. You know what? I'm autistic. And like, sometimes it's hard for me to understand what you mean. So let me just make sure we're on the same page, because then it feels like it does put the responsibility on me of like, what you're saying isn't unclear. It's just that
you're processing it differently.
Yeah.
And it might also help with that patience factor. And like, if they know that, you know, they need to maybe communicate things a different way with you, or, you know, try different methods or tones or whatever it is. What would you give, and if you have any advice for maybe people that are kind of going through the same kind of struggle, what would you advise them to do for advocating for themselves? Like, are there tips or tricks or things that you might inspire them to adapt or adopt?
Well, that's tough. I guess it kind of, I feel like it could be case by case, but one thing I noticed when I was going through getting tested, so I had been told that getting like an actual diagnosis was very difficult, very expensive, long waiting lists, like years. So I was just like, crap, how am I ever going to get this like figured out? So the first thing that I noticed was that there's kind of a split in the autism community where some people think that self-diagnosis is valid. Me, I do. And some people think that it's not, you need to have a clinical diagnosis. And so I guess with people struggling, like if I do feel like I was really privileged and lucky to have gotten in within like 6 weeks. And from I think the day that I was like, holy shit, that's what autism actually is. I think I'm autistic. That was like January 28th. And then I went in and had my test. I think I got my results from the tests like March 25th. So it was like 2 months, which is fast, like from what I've heard. But like just the research and the things that I did in that time, like it felt like I was like in this weird limbo state where I wasn't normal, but I wasn't considered autistic either. And so what was I? And I just absolutely think that self-advocacy and self-diagnosis can be valid. I think that it's kind of like I've said this analogy to some people and I've gotten, one person gave me some kickback on it, but I feel like being autistic is like being left-handed. So it's like, you don't need a doctor to tell you that you work better with a utensil in your left hand than your right hand. And like the society doesn't need you to have a doctor say, hey, I'm left-handed. So before I can write with this left-handed pencil, I'm going to need a doctor to let, you know, for all these normal right-handed people to accept me. Like that's ridiculous, you know? So I think if you know you're autistic, you know, because I never felt so sure about anything in my life. Like I knew for 100% as soon as the paradigm shift happened, I was like, oh, I'm autistic for sure. Like not, and I didn't even do the research about like the levels of functioning. And somebody was like, maybe you're Asperger's. And I didn't even know that Asperger's was like a really gross term that we're trying to move away from. But I was just like, nope, I don't even feel like I'm Asperger's. I feel like I'm just full blown like autism. And people were like, it's like, it's not a bad thing to be autistic. It's like left-handed people exist. I bet when left-handed people were trying to like advocate for left-handed scissors, left-handed desks, like people were like, no, like, but it's just a different way of processing information, of using the tools that you've been provided to get through that information. And it's not wrong. It's just different. So I guess that's kind of how I see it. So like the self-advocacy is a big thing.
And learning how to communicate those things, right? And like learning how to be upfront about it and talk about it, because that's the only way we're ever going to come to agreements or any kind of, being able to communicate and work together.
Yeah.
Is if we all come to the table fully as ourselves, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And like, that's my new mission now, is like, I just want to like post on social media or like do community outreach kinds of things where I'm talking about myself doing everyday things, but I'm also autistic, because it's not like
normalize it.
Yes. To normalize it, to make it so that the other people who are also masking and hiding themselves from the world can then see somebody who has gone through the process, because it's scary and it's hard. And, like I've already gone through it, so I might as well share the results. And like, if it's kind of like what we were talking about, where Gen Z is like, you know what, I'm going to put on this outfit that like the whole world is going to be like, oh, you're overweight, you shouldn't wear that, but I feel good in it, I'm going to go out and wear it anyways. Then, other people see that and they're like, I'm going to do that too. She looks great, I'm going to do that too. So like, if I can just normalize how I am and how my autism is with me, maybe like a handful of people will see it and be like, oh, I can be myself too. And then that would just be, it would make everything worth it. Like all the hardships would be worth it to help other people realize that being autistic isn't a bad thing. So yeah, I don't know.
I love that. No, it's good. Where can people find you online, or how can they follow your adventures?
So I have a couple of Instagram accounts. I have a regular Instagram account for just like life things, but then I have one for my art. So I do a lot of animation illustration. So it's just instagram.com/Lux, which is LUX _, and then my last name, which is Stupica. It's STUPICA. And then I also, I guess I didn't say it when I was talking about what I do, but I'm also a mermaid, a professional mermaid. So I took a little bit of a break because of everything that was going on. And I guess I was just like really in an autistic burnout, which I didn't know was a thing. And I was working at an aquarium. So I was working either 6 or 7 days a week, and it was just too much. So that was one of the first jobs I had to let go once I started realizing like I needed some space to take care of my mental health. But I love being a mermaid. I put on, for those of you who have no idea what it is, like I put on a silicone tail and I go swimming around in like a tank with sharks and stingrays, and just perform for people underwater, and it's awesome. It's amazing. But so I started an Instagram account for that. So I am just Mermaid Lux, or I think it's Instagram.com/Lux _the_mermaid. So Lux the Mermaid. Those are probably the biggest ones. And then I'm starting to try to do stuff with my TikTok, which is funny because I feel too old for that app. But there's millennials all over the place on it. So yeah, on TikTok, my @ is Luxaroo, which is LUXAROO. And I don't know where that one came from, but
it's cute.
Yeah, I need to make a website with my artwork and stuff. And I've been thinking about starting a YouTube channel where like I originally was going to do animation tutorials, or like talk about the mermaid world, or like an environmental stuff like conservation and sustainability. But then I start thinking about all that goes into making a YouTube channel, like branding and voice. And then I get overwhelmed and shut down, and it's like, well, I'll do that another day. But I would like to do one. So I think I might start just like making videos about me. And then is it, like I'm talking about autism, animation, art, illustration, mermaiding, anything, just what I like. And then if anybody else starts to like it, cool.
Yeah. You might inspire people, that's it's always good.
I would love to. There's a quote that I absolutely love. I say it all the time, and I will probably butcher it, but it's something like when we let our own light shine, we give others permission to do the same. And I love that, because there's always people who are going to try to steal your light and put your light out. But like, if you share your light with others, you're just making the light stronger and brighter. And I just love that idea. And I just think it's very true. So I would like to just live my life and be an autistic person and kind of like help change the fear and stigma and like re-educate people about what autism is. And yeah, I don't know, maybe change some minds.
I love that. Thank you so much for chatting today. And this was a great talk. And I loved learning more about you and your journey.
Yeah, it's always fun to talk with you. You do such great things for the community, and I'm always happy whenever you want to chat about anything.
Code Savvy Presents is produced by Code Savvy, a 501c3 nonprofit organization committed to making computer science accessible. Visit us at www.codesavvy.org.